Under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, Daniel Hayes sat alone in his crumbling house, his son's weak cough echoing through the night. The bills piled higher than his courage, and pride had long kept him silent, until desperation broke him. One trembling hand typed out a plea for help, words raw with fear and exhaustion. But fate had other plans. With a single slip of his thumb, the message went to the wrong number. He expected silence, maybe ridicule. Instead, minutes later, headlights swept across his yard, and a knock thundered at his door. When he opened it, he didn't find a neighbor or a stranger. He found a millionaire standing on his porch, with words that would change his life forever. Daniel Hayes sat on the edge of his worn-out sofa, the glow of the television flickering against walls stained with time and exhaustion. His 5-year-old son, Matthew, coughed weakly in the next room, a sound that stabbed him deeper than any physical wound ever could. The boy's fever had spiked again, and Daniel had already maxed out every credit card paying for doctor visits and prescriptions. His last paycheck from the construction site barely covered rent. The fridge hummed almost mockingly, empty except for a half carton of milk and a jar of peanut butter. At that hour past midnight, silence pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. Desperation made his fingers tremble as he picked up his cracked phone. He thought of reaching out to an old friend from his union days, a man who might still have connections to a support group. Pride had kept Daniel silent for too long, but tonight his pride had collapsed under the weight of worry for his child. He began typing a message, his words faltering, sentences broken. "I can't do this anymore. Matt's medicine. No money left. Please, I don't know who else to call." He deleted, retyped, then finally pressed send, not realizing his fatigue and shaking hands had scrolled to the wrong contact. When the screen blinked, "Message sent," Daniel froze. The name above the thread wasn't the one he had meant to select. His heart sank as he realized it had gone to a number he didn't recognize. For a long moment he stared, horrified at what he had just done. Shame curled hot in his chest. He had just bared his soul to a stranger. He pressed the power button, ready to toss the phone aside and bury his humiliation under silence. Then the vibration startled him. A reply lit up the screen. Just 3 words. "Where do you live?" Daniel frowned. It wasn't scolding, wasn't mocking. It was direct, almost urgent. His pulse raced. No one should care. No one ever did. He typed back hesitantly, "Wrong number. Sorry." He wanted to close the door on the moment, but something about the reply lingered, like a hand reaching through darkness. Matthew coughed again, harder this time, pulling Daniel to his side. He pressed a damp cloth to the boy's forehead, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. His chest ached with guilt and failure. After settling the child, he returned to the sofa, phone still glowing. Another message appeared. "There are no wrong numbers, just people who need to be heard." A chill crept over Daniel. Who on earth was this? A scammer? Some cruel prank? Yet there was nothing but sincerity in those words. He typed nothing back. Instead, he stared at the doorway, at the sagging frame of the little house he could barely afford. His mind spiraled with fear and suspicion. Outside, a car engine hummed. At first, he thought it was a neighbor, but the sound grew closer, smoother than the rusted pickups usually rattling through the block. Headlights swept across his living room window. Daniel stiffened, every muscle taut. Nobody ever visited him at this hour. Then came the knock. Firm, deliberate, echoing against the thin wood of the front door. He stood frozen, phone in hand, breath caught between panic and disbelief. His first thought was that someone had come to collect a debt, but the message thread still glowed on the screen, as if daring him to open the door and see the face on the other side. He moved slowly, barefoot across the creaking floorboards, each step heavier than the last. The knock came again, sharper this time. His hand hovered over the doorknob. His mind screamed to stay quiet, to let them go. But then Matthew coughed again, weaker, reminding him that every choice he made was no longer just his own. Daniel swallowed hard, gripping the handle, and whispered to himself, God, please let this not be another disaster. The lock clicked, and the door opened to the night air. A figure stood framed in the glow of a sleek black car parked at the curb. Daniel blinked, disbelieving, because the stranger before him wasn't a thug, wasn't a neighbor. It was a woman whose face he'd only seen on magazine covers and business channels, a millionaire, standing on his porch at midnight. And in that surreal moment, with the night holding its breath, Daniel's life tilted on an axis he could never have imagined. Daniel's breath caught as the figure on his porch stepped closer. The porch light revealed a woman in a tailored coat that shimmered faintly in the night. Her heels clicked softly against the cracked concrete, an elegant rhythm that felt out of place in his shabby neighborhood. Daniel blinked again, recognizing her face. Amelia Grant, the business magnate whose photographs adorned magazines in grocery store aisles, whose name he had heard in every news headline about billion-dollar deals. And now she was standing before his broken door, eyes steady, lips pressed into something that was neither pity nor disdain. I got your message, she said, her voice low but commanding, a voice accustomed to boardrooms and cameras. And I couldn't ignore it. Daniel gripped the edge of the door, knuckles white. He wanted to slam it shut, to pretend this surreal scene wasn't happening. But before he could speak, a weak cough drifted from the back room. Amelia tilted her head, listening, then did something Daniel didn't expect. She stepped forward, her gaze softening. Is that your son? She asked. Daniel stammered, caught between pride and panic. He's fine. You shouldn't be here. This doesn't make sense. But Amelia didn't retreat. She glanced around his dimly lit living room, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the sagging couch. It was a world far removed from the penthouses she was known to occupy. Another cough from Matthew broke the silence, sharper this time. And before Daniel could stop her, Amelia moved past him. She found the boy lying in a tangle of sheets, his cheeks flushed, hair damp with sweat. To Daniel's astonishment, Amelia knelt beside the bed, brushing the boy's forehead with a tenderness that felt practiced, as though she had done this many times before. Matthew blinked up at her, too weak to speak, but his small hand clutched hers instinctively. Daniel's heart twisted at the sight. His son, clinging to a stranger whose life had no reason to intersect with theirs. Back in the living room, Amelia sat across from Daniel at the scarred wooden table. For a moment she said nothing, just studied him with eyes that seemed to look through defenses. Then she spoke, softer this time. I grew up in a house not so different from this one, she began. My father worked 3 jobs, and when he got sick, we couldn't afford treatment. I watched him die in front of me, not because there wasn't medicine, but because there wasn't money. She paused, her hands folded tightly. That never leaves you. No matter how much you build, no matter how many zeros you add to your bank account, the memory of that helplessness stays. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't expected confession, least of all from someone like her. He wanted to believe her words, yet anger stirred in him too. Funny, he said bitterly. One of your companies bought out the plant I worked at, shut it down. That's how I ended up here. You talk about memories, but people like me live with consequences. His voice cracked under the strain of years swallowed. Amelia didn't flinch. She nodded slowly, as if absorbing the blow. I know. I've read reports. I know decisions made in rooms I sat in cost people their livelihoods. That haunts me too. Maybe it's too late for apologies, but when your message reached me, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't an accident. Maybe fate wanted me to hear it. Her gaze met his squarely. So I came, not to offer pity, not to write a check, to see if there's a way to change something starting here. Daniel stared at her, torn between suspicion and the faintest ember of hope. He wanted to shout at her to leave, to take her expensive shoes and promises somewhere else. Yet the image of Matthew clinging to her hand was seared into his mind. His pride roared, but beneath it, exhaustion whispered of surrender. Amelia leaned forward, her voice steady but urgent. "Let me help you, not with charity, but with opportunity. I have projects, initiatives no one in my circle supports because they don't make a profit, but they could give men like you a chance to rebuild. Work, stability, dignity. I can open that door for you, if you're willing." Daniel's chest tightened. He had sworn never to rely on anyone again, never to place his family's survival in the hands of another. Yet here was a woman whose empire had partly broken him, offering to rebuild what she once helped dismantle. The contradiction made his head spin. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. His mistrust, her regret, the boy's frail breathing down the hall. Finally, Amelia broke it with a quiet but unwavering statement. "Let me change your life," she said, "but on my terms." The words hung in the stale air, electrifying and terrifying all at once. Daniel had no answer. Not yet. For nights afterward, Daniel lay awake replaying Amelia's words. "On my terms." The phrase both infuriated and intrigued him. He had spent years clawing for independence, refusing handouts, convinced that accepting help meant surrendering his dignity. Yet his son's fragile cough in the dark reminded him that pride didn't pay medical bills. It was Matthew, not himself, who tipped the scales. So when Amelia returned the next day with an offer, Daniel swallowed his bitterness and listened. She spoke not of charity, but of work, managing logistics for a new community initiative her foundation was quietly building. It was risky, unpopular among her board, but it needed someone who understood struggle from the inside. Against every instinct screaming caution, Daniel accepted. The weeks that followed were a test. He walked into sleek offices filled with people in suits who glanced at his calloused hands and second-hand shoes with thinly veiled disdain. At first he bristled, ready to quit, but Amelia pushed him forward. She met him not as a benefactor, but as a partner in building something different. "You're not here because I feel sorry for you," she told him. "You're here because I believe people like you see what others ignore." Her faith, spoken with matter-of-fact certainty, was harder to dismiss than any paycheck. Slowly, Daniel found rhythm in the work. He brought ideas that others overlooked. Affordable housing logistics, better supply routes for clinics in neglected neighborhoods. Amelia listened, truly listened, sometimes challenging, sometimes conceding. Their arguments were sharp, often heated, but beneath them lay respect neither admitted aloud. And while Daniel wrestled with his resentment of her past decisions, he began to see a woman still haunted by the ghosts of her own beginnings. Then came the twist he hadn't expected. Late one evening, while reviewing files left carelessly open, Daniel discovered evidence of sabotage. Contracts manipulated, funds redirected. Someone within Amelia's empire was trying to strangle her new initiative before it could take root. The scale of it shook him. It wasn't just about his job. It was about a war between greed and compassion, and Amelia was standing in the crossfire. Daniel faced a choice. He could walk away, protect himself and Matthew from the inevitable storm, or he could step in, risk everything for the woman who had appeared on his porch because of a wrong message. In the end, the decision came easily. He thought of Matthew's tiny hand clutching hers that first night. He thought of every man and woman like him, drowning quietly because no one believed their lives were worth saving. And he knew. The confrontation was fierce. Daniel exposed the scheme with proof, standing beside Amelia as whispers rippled through the corporate halls. What surprised him most wasn't her wealth or power. It was the look in her eyes when he refused to let her stand alone. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, raw, as if she had finally found someone unafraid to tell her the truth. Afterward, Amelia didn't thank him with money. Instead, she asked him to help her build something lasting. Together, they launched a foundation named Wrong Message, Right Heart, designed to support single parents clawing their way through the same shadows Daniel once knew. For the first time, Daniel's voice carried weight in rooms where men like him had never been invited. Months later, Daniel sat on his porch, with Matthew asleep in his arms. The little house was still modest, the walls still worn, but hope filled the spaces where despair once lived. Across the street, a new community center, funded by the foundation, stood as proof that one misfired message could ignite a revolution of compassion. Daniel unfolded a note Amelia had left him on the day the foundation launched. In her precise handwriting, it read, "Sometimes fate dials the wrong number so the right story can begin." Daniel smiled, brushing Matthew's hair from his forehead. He no longer saw himself as a man defined by mistakes and losses. He was a father, a builder, a survivor, and now he was part of something larger than himself, a legacy born not of perfection, but of second chances. The wrong message had found the right heart, and from it, an entire community would be given the chance to start again. Sometimes, the wrong number isn't a mistake at all. It's destiny knocking on the door when hope feels lost. Daniel's desperate message didn't just save his little boy. It opened a path for countless families who once believed no one would hear their cries. From that single moment of courage, a new chapter began. One where compassion replaced silence, and strangers became lifelines. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. No plea is too small, no act of kindness too late. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and be part of our community where stories remind us that second chances are real.